Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Okay, welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I am your host, Michael Clogs. Well, yesterday there was a agreement to a resolution to a ceasefire for Palestine. And we're actually going to hear the stakeout that was done after that, the vote, and we'll hear what was said in that stakeout in a little bit. The day after, they're still debating if the resolution is binding, and we're going to hear arguments about or questions about it, the charter, the UN Charter. Is it a binding agreement for all countries that are members? And is a really good question. Is the resolutions that come out from the United Nations, are they binding for countries to follow? Do they have to follow them or risk consequences? And what would those consequences actually be? So, if Israel decides that they're not going to stop the mass destruction, that they're not going to allow land openings into Gaza so that humanitarian efforts can be distributed, because they believe that the Hamas is actually taking these humanitarian efforts and distributing to their own people so that they can stay well and not have to worry about and hide from the Israeli defenses. Are they going to continue? Are they going to continue, or will they follow the resolution and stop the destruction and stop the fighting? Will the Hamas turn over the hostages as well? So there's a lot of questions behind that. Okay, so moving back to Canada, there are, of course, government healthcare. There are a lot of different ways of planning, and because each province has their own set of problems, that each province is in charge of their healthcare system, even though it is kind of a universal thing. If you're visiting the province and you're a Canadian, of course you'll get equal treatment. So the federal minister of health, Mark Holland, he was in New Brunswick, and they were discussing a $43 million plan to upgrade a large number of systems and services that are available to the residents of New Brunswick, which is not limited, but definitely includes senior care and mental health, two of the biggest issues that we see. And two of the issues that are affecting loved ones in our society, mental health, when we look at the homeless populations and some of the addictions, that the addiction becomes a symptom of a much bigger mental health issue that person may have, and what may have also led them to becoming homeless to begin with. Senior care, where some things are just simply inadequate. The nursing home situation, where you see our seniors being abused. These are our grandparents and our parents who cared for us while we were children, and they are left to abusive people, or people who don't have the passion for caring for the seniors and leave them neglected. So it's good to see a large number of upgrades come to a province, and that will help care for the residents on many different levels. So mental health and senior care are only two of the things. There are many, many more things that they will be actually discussing and ensuring that people get the level of care that they should have, that would make Canada healthcare system one of the best on our globe. So we'll hear from New Brunswick about that. We're also going to hear, because there was a bridge collapse in Baltimore, a tragic accident, a ship lost control, and the Francis Scott Key Bridge was struck, and after striking, it collapsed. There were some vehicles. They managed to get most of the vehicles off the bridge. There were a few left, and you're going to hear some statements from President Biden about what the U.S. federal government is going to do about repairing the bridge, ensuring that families and their loved ones are found. Apparently there were some unaccountable people unaccounted for, and there were some injuries, according to what President Biden said. But he made a promise that the federal government would actually take care of the bill of replacing it, and then figure out later on the liability that might be due to the bridge being struck by a ship, the company that owns the ship, that later on they'll figure all that part out. He said the more immediate problem is to actually get the bridge rebuilt and get the ports that are connected by that bridge and that are on that river inlet back into action and back doing the job they're supposed to do. So why don't we start off with the Baltimore Bridge, and then we'll move into New Brunswick, and then the Palestinian ceasefire resolution.
Good afternoon. Before I leave for North Carolina, which I'm going to do in a few minutes, I want to speak briefly about the terrible incident and accident that happened in Baltimore this morning. At about 1:30, a container ship struck the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which I've been over many, many times commuting from the state of Delaware, either on a train or by car. I've been in Baltimore Harbor many times. And the bridge collapsed, sending several people and vehicles into the water, into the river. And multiple U.S. Coast Guard units, which are stationed very nearby, thank God, were immediately deployed along with local emergency personnel. And the Coast Guard is leading the response at the port, where representatives from the Federal Highway Administration, the FBI, the Department of Transportation, the Army Corps of Engineers, as well as Maryland officials and Baltimore police and fire. They're all working together to coordinate an emergency response. Officials at the scene estimate 8 people were unaccounted for still. Not still, were unaccounted for. That number might change. 2 have been rescued, 1 without injury, 1 in critical condition. And the search and rescue operation is continuing for all those remaining as we speak. I spoke with Governor Moore this morning, as well as the Mayor of Baltimore, the county executive, both United States senators and the congressman. And my Secretary of Transportation is on the scene. I told them we're going to send all the federal resources they need as we respond to this emergency. And I mean all the federal resources. And we're going to rebuild that port together. Everything so far indicates that this was a terrible accident. At this time, we have no other indication, no other reason to believe there's any intentional act here. Personnel on board the ship were able to alert the Maryland Department of Transportation that they had lost control of their vessel, as you all know and reported. As a result, local authorities were able to close the bridge to traffic before the bridge was struck, which undoubtedly saved lives. And our prayers are with everyone involved in this terrible accident and all the families, especially those waiting for the news of their loved one right now. I know every minute in that circumstance feels like a lifetime. You just don't know. It's just terrible. We're incredibly grateful for the brave rescuers who immediately rushed to the scene and to the people of Baltimore who want to say, we're with you. We're going to stay with you as long as it takes. And like the governor said, you're Maryland tough, you're Baltimore strong, and we're going to get through this together. And I promise we're not leaving. Here's what's happening now. The search and rescue operation is our top priority. Ship traffic in the Port of Baltimore has been suspended until further notice, and we'll need to clear that channel before the ship traffic can resume. The Army Corps of Engineers is on the spot and is going to help lead this effort to clear the channel. The Port of Baltimore is one of the nation's largest shipping hubs, and I've been there a number of times as a senator and as a vice president. It handles a record amount of cargo last year. It's also the top port in America for both imports and exports of automobiles and light trucks. Around 850,000 vehicles go through that port every single year, and we're going to get it up and running again as soon as possible. 15,000 jobs depend on that port, and we're going to do everything we can to protect those jobs and help those workers. The bridge is also critical for travel, not just for Baltimore, but for the Northeast Corridor. Over 30,000 vehicles cross the Francis Scott Key Bridge on a daily basis. It's virtually, it's one of the most important elements for the economy in the Northeast and the quality of life. My transportation secretary is there now. As I told Governor Moore, I've directed my team to move heaven and earth to reopen the port and rebuild the bridge as soon as humanly possible. And we're going to work hand in hand with the support of Maryland to support Maryland whatever they ask for. We're going to work with our partners in Congress to make sure the state gets the support it needs. It's my intention that the federal government will pay for the entire cost of reconstructing that bridge, and I expect the Congress to support my effort. This is going to take some time. The people of Baltimore can count on us, though, to stick with them at every step of the way until the port is reopened and the bridge is rebuilt. You know, we're not leaving until this job gets done. Not leaving until then. So I just want to say God bless everybody everyone harmed this morning and their families. And may God bless the first responders, many of whom risking their lives. And the reason I'm not going to take a lot of questions, there's remaining issues that are open that we got to determine what's going to happen in terms of the rescue mission and the like. But
Do you plan to go to Baltimore?
Aujourd'hui. Premièrement, avant de débuter, j'aimerais prendre un instant pour reconnaître que nous sommes tous réunis aujourd'hui sur le territoire traditionnel non cédé du peuple Mi'kmaq, un territoire qui est couvert par les traités de paix et d'amitié. Je dois vous dire, c'est vraiment le fun d'être ici parmi tellement de visages familiers, des amis ainsi que des collègues. Thank you so much for all of you for joining us today. It's really great to be surrounded by many familiar faces in the crowd. Pour ceux qui ne me connaissent pas, je m'appelle Ginette Petitpas-Taylor. Je suis la députée pour la circonscription de Moncton, Riverview et Dieppe et je suis votre maîtresse de cérémonie aujourd'hui. I'm extremely happy to be joined today by my friends and colleague. First and foremost, the Honorable Mark Holland, Minister of Health. Mark, thank you so much for being with us today and bienvenue en Acadie. Nous sommes toujours contents d'avoir des invités spéciaux in notre coin. Aussi, Dominique Leblanc, merci. Je pense qu'habituellement, on dit juste Dominique. Dominique is like Cher. He doesn't really need the formal introduction. Just the first name kind of works. So there we go. But Dominique, always great to see you here today. I'm also pleased to be here with Bruce Fitch, the Minister of Health, Provincial Minister of Health, and also Kathy Bacchus, New Brunswick's Minister for Seniors, and last but not least, Sherry Wilson, the Minister of Mental Health and Addiction. So thank you so much for being here today. Nous sommes très heureux d'être ici parmi vous aujourd'hui pour cette annonce importante qui contribuera à améliorer les services de soins de santé et l'accès à ceux-ci, tout pour les résidents du Nouveau-Brunswick. Formerly, when I was the Minister of Health, I had the privilege of working with my home province to reach the first bilateral agreement supporting home and community care, mental health, and addictions. I was thrilled to be here then, and I'm again thrilled to be here today to see this collaboration continuing. J'aimerais aussi prendre un instant pour vraiment remercier l'hôpital Georges Dumont qui nous ont bien accueillis aujourd'hui, puis aussi de dire un gros merci à tous les travailleurs de la santé qui font un travail incroyable jour après jour ici dans la région du sud-est du Nouveau-Brunswick. Like many of you here, we've all had family and friends that have had to access the services here at the hospital. And I just want to say thank you for the work that you do day in and day out. Not always easy, but we certainly appreciate all that you do. Thank you. Votre travail fait une réelle différence dans le soutien à la santé et le mieux-être des membres de notre communauté. So now let's get this show on the road for the announcement. Before that I do the formal introduction of our first speaker, I also wanted to advise the media that we will be here afterwards for questions and scrums. So now it is my honor and privilege, as I've indicated, to welcome my friend and colleague, the Honourable Mark Holland, Minister of Health. Mark was first elected as the Member of Parliament for Ajax, Ontario back in 2004. And as the Member of Parliament, he served as the Leader of the Government in the House of Commons. He's also served as the Chief Government Whip and Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety, Emergency Preparedness. He's been a staunch advocate of helping marriage equality rights and played a key role in helping to reform Canada's animal cruelty laws. In both private and public roles, Minister Holland has backed health-related initiatives. He has served as the Executive Director of the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada's Ontario Mission, and as well as the National Director for Children and Youth. And I have to say, having worked with Mark for the past 10 years, he is a strong advocate when it comes to mental health issues and all health-related issues. And Mark, we've seen you work tirelessly over the past 7 or 8 months, and we're truly thrilled to have you here in Moncton. So without further ado, let's give Mark a warm welcome.
Merci beaucoup, Jeanette. C'est un grand plaisir d'être ici avec vous et à Moncton pour une annonce aujourd'hui vraiment important, mais pas juste pour Nouveau-Brunswick, mais aussi pour notre pays. Et c'est vraiment avec un esprit de coopération que toutes les choses sont possibles. Et je veux commencer de dire un grand merci à Bruce Fitch. C'est un grand plaisir de travailler avec vous, Bruce, et votre travail dans ce dossier ici. Cette annonce aujourd'hui est possible avec votre collaboration et merci beaucoup pour ça. Et aussi, c'est un grand plaisir d'être ici avec mon ami Dominique, qui est quelqu'un absolument remarquable. Mais l'histoire de Dominique récemment, c'était une histoire remarquable aussi. Et c'est un bon exemple de notre système de santé, mais aussi les qualités de santé ici à l'hôpital du Monde. You know, Dominic and I were seatmates. And Dom would talk about his journey and about the extraordinary doctors and nurses who came to his aid in his moment of darkness. And we know he wouldn't be here without you. And we're going to talk today about the challenges that exist in our healthcare system. But it's so important to take a moment how lucky we are to have a system that whether or not you're a minister of the Crown or you're somebody who comes in without a penny in your pocket, you're going to get the exact same care. The doctors and the nurses here, the personal support care workers, what they did for Dominic, let me just first of all say, because my good friend is still with us and serving this country, thank you. And, you know, I had my own experience just 2 weeks ago. My son was in a terrible car accident. and I was very worried for his life. And he was sent to Sunnybrook, where he received extraordinary care. And that care would have been provided to him whether or not he was on his own, again, without a penny, or he was the son of a health minister. So when we're having these incredible challenges, it's important to remember we really do have the most extraordinary health system in the world. And when it's there, and needed, boy, do our doctors and nurses and personal support care workers show up. C'était un temps vraiment difficile pendant la pandémie. C'était un temps difficile pour tout le monde, mais c'était particulièrement difficile pour les médecins et les infirmières. It was a time of challenge and difficulty beyond all reasonable asking. And yet healthcare workers in that moment all came together without complaint, with a singular focus on helping us get through that. I also want to thank you for that. And you came out of that period and rightfully expected you were going to get a break. That view of coming out of the pandemic and all of that hard work, that you were going to be given an opportunity to rest. But backlogs and burnout meant that actually the challenge got bigger, not smaller. And a lot of the stresses that had already existed in our health system became more evident. Ça, c'est la raison pour laquelle nous sommes ici aujourd'hui. C'est notre tour de prendre d'action et de s'assurer qu'on peut améliorer notre système de santé maintenant, mais de faire des changements majeurs dans notre système avec des transformations qu'on a besoin. Because it's that spirit, to me, that is so remarkable and shows us what's possible. In that brief moment in the pandemic when everybody was pulling all in the same direction, when we set aside jurisdiction and we set aside partisanship and difference, we were showing how much could be accomplished in our health system by working together. And that's certainly the spirit with which we are here today, and it shows us what's possible. And so I want to say to you that this agreement is a starting line, not a finish line. That the investments that we're about to announce and talk about today are the start of what we need to do to transform our health system, so that you on the front lines who've been working tirelessly through the pandemic and the days afterwards can know that each day in front of you is going to get better, and that our public health system is going to receive the support that it needs. That's why I'm so pleased to be here today to announce two agreements that will see close to $430 million flow into New Brunswick healthcare system. These agreements are tailored to meet the unique needs and challenges of New Brunswick. Together, they represent an extremely important step forward. The first of these agreements is worth more than $313 million. It will increase coordination, and just to some examples, increase coordination and access to primary care, which includes investing in mobile X-ray programs for nursing home residents to help reduce the number of transfers and non-urgent visits to hospital. It will support recruitment, retention, and training initiatives for health workers. This will be done by implementing a practice readiness assessment program to support the transition of up to 10 international medical graduates into the workforce each year. It will modernize healthcare systems with health data and digital tools by improving timely access to both virtual and in-person primary care. It will expand the delivery of culturally appropriate mental health and substance use services. And I know that my colleague Dominic LeBlanc will have more to say on that soon. We're also announcing the Aging with Dignity Agreement, providing close to $117 million over the next 5 years. This funding will help people in the province age closer to home. Ce financement aidera les habitants de la province à vieillir plus près de chez eux, ayant accès à soins à domicile ou un établissement de soins de longue durée sécuritaire. Nous devons nous assurer qu'après une vie de contribution et de labeur, les personnes âgées profitent de leur retraite dans la santé et dans la dignité. Quickly, some examples of how that funding will be put into use: improving home and community care systems and palliative care, including opening new location for patients and their families to access integrated residential hospice services. Strengthening the long-term care workforce through improving training for staff across the entire long-term care continuum. Aligning quality and safety measures across the long-term care sector to prevent premature entry into nursing homes. Together, these two agreements represent an important step forward. But mixed with our actions on pharmacare, on dental care, where we're looking upstream, the work that we need to do together on interoperability, on data, on the Safe Long-Term Care Act, I just want you all to know that help is coming, and that the force and that you met the challenges of those dark days during the pandemic inspires all of us to make sure that we make the changes in our health system to make sure that we have the best health system possible. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today. Thanks so much. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Dominic LeBlanc, the Minister of Public Safety, National Security, Intergovernmental Affairs, and Democratic Institutions. He's got a few jobs there.
Merci, merci beaucoup, Marc. Toujours un plaisir d'être avec toi. It's for Ginette and me to have our friend and colleague Marc come to Moncton on a Tuesday morning with this important news, and to do it here at the Georges L. Dumont University Hospital Center. Marc, means a great deal to me personally, but thank you for your friendship. And you develop a certain camaraderie. Ginette probably had the same experience. In the House of Commons, you share a desk. So you have a seatmate, right? You have one desk, two people, two chairs, but one desk. So the people you share the desk with, you spend hours chatting away. There's votes that go late at night, all night in some cases. So you develop a cheerful and positive and fun relationship with the women and men you have a chance to share that little space in the House of Commons with. And Marc and I had a couple of years together at that moment. And Marc, it means a lot to me that you're here. Thank you very much. Je suis aussi très heureux, évidemment, d'être ici avec mon amie, ma voisine, Ginette Petitpas-Taylor, et nos amis, les ministres du gouvernement du Nouveau-Brunswick. Marc a souligné le partenariat important de notre gouvernement avec les provinces à travers le pays. Moi, comme ministre des Relations intergouvernementales, j'ai une certaine perspective sur l'importance de ces relations-là. Et je salue nos ministres du gouvernement provincial pour leur partenariat et leur travail en partenariat avec nous et le gouvernement du Canada. As Marc noted, I have come to the Georges Dumont University Hospital not only as a member of parliament or as a minister. Marc correctly noted that I came here as a patient. I see some of the doctors who were so kind in treating me. I tease Dr. Rémy Leblanc and Dr. Linda Leblanc. They're not all Leblancs, the doctors here. I thought I was like Dr. Leblanc, like if paging Dr. Leblanc, half the room leaves. Dr. Finn was my doctor and Dr. Chantal Arsenault. Mais les soins que j'ai reçus ici étaient extraordinaires. Les femmes et les hommes que Marc a décrits, qui m'ont soigné dans les moments extrêmement difficiles, c'était la veille de Noël quand j'ai rencontré Rémi aux soins intensifs à un moment donné, il y a 6 ans. J'étais extraordinairement chanceux. Et moi, je voulais juste témoigner ici à votre hôpital, devant vous tous, l'appréciation, le respect, l'admiration que j'ai pour les soins que j'ai reçus. Et comme Marc a dit, je sais que c'est le cas qui se répète tous les jours, tous les semaines chez vous. Vous faites un travail remarquable. On a souvent tendance à regarder des défis, des files d'attente, des choses qu'on peut améliorer ensemble. Et c'est vrai, comme Marc a bien dit, mais c'est aussi vrai que quand on est vraiment malade, il y a des personnes extraordinaires qui se dévouent à leurs patients. Et moi, j'étais témoin de ça d'une façon extraordinaire. So I'm happy to be here with my colleagues for what is an important announcement, we believe, for the future of healthcare in our province in New Brunswick. I had an opportunity about a year and a half ago with Marc's predecessor as Minister of Health, Jean-Yves Duclos, after the Prime Minister had a meeting in Ottawa in February last year with all of the premiers to talk about a long-term funding agreement between the Government of Canada and the 13 provinces and territories. And then Jean-Yves and I took to the road. We saw 13 provincial premiers and health ministers in about 8 days across the country. And I remember that meeting, Bruce, we had in St. John with Premier Higgs. Right away, the government of New Brunswick said they wanted to be a partner with the government of Canada. They wanted to work on a shared action plan that I'm sure our provincial colleagues will describe. But it was an easy and constructive relationship with the government of New Brunswick from those first conversations. And I think it's important to say that. It took some time to work out the detailed agreement that Mark and Bruce are announcing today. But I was proud as a New Brunswicker, and Jeanette and I spoke about this often, in terms of the desire for the government of New Brunswick to work with the government of Canada, not simply to hassle about how much more money can the government of Canada send the provinces. That's always in our federation a back and forth discussion. I think John A. Macdonald convened the first meeting where the Prime Minister met premiers to talk about funding of different programs. What I liked about that conversation is you had governments across the country concerned about patients, about healthcare workers, about a system, as Mark said, that was facing stresses from the pandemic, but stresses that existed before the pandemic and have become, as all of you know better than certainly I would, in some cases more complicated coming out of the pandemic. So the focus was on what can we do to improve a world-class healthcare system that's accessible to everybody in a way that's affordable for the taxpayers that fund it, but with a focus on patient service and on outcomes. And that was the conversation that we had across the country. And that's the work that Mark has done in the last number of months. Mark and I stayed up a bit too late at my house in town last night. And this is the 12th announcement that Mark has made in recent weeks across the country. There's one more after Moncton today. But Mark, you have, on behalf of our government, done a remarkable work in finalizing these agreements, which we hope will be an important step, not the final step, as you said, but an important step in improving a healthcare system that's so cherished by Canadians in every part of our country. Alors, Marc, je te salue, je te remercie pour ton travail. Ginette l'a bien dit, Mark est quelqu'un dans sa vie personnelle et dans sa vie professionnelle en dehors de la politique qui a toujours été intéressé dans les questions de santé et qui s'est donné comme mission professionnelle et personnelle de travailler dans le domaine bien avant que le premier ministre lui a demandé d'être le ministre de la Santé du Canada. Alors, quel privilège de t'avoir à Moncton et merci pour ton travail. Et avec ça, je tourne la parole maintenant à notre ami Bruce Fitch, le ministre de la Santé du Nouveau-Brunswick. Bruce.
Well, bonjour à tous et bienvenue à Moncton, Minister Holland. Et c'est un grand plaisir pour moi d'être ici aujourd'hui pour cette annonce. Quand vous avez 3 ministres fédéraux, 3 ministres provinciaux, tu connais bien, c'est une bonne annonce, une big annonce, grande annonce aujourd'hui. And I know I want to say thank you as well to all the medical staff here at this hospital and right across Horizon and Vitality. And I sometimes mention that my parents were involved in the medical field. My father was a doctor, pediatrician, and sometimes he would work out of the Dumont Hospital, sometimes out of the Moncton Hospital. And during the summers, he would do clinics up Tracadie, Richbucto. And the reason I mention that is because I know the sacrifices that families make in order for their parents or siblings to be doctors. And so through that story, I want to say thank you very much. Je vous dis merci beaucoup pour votre bon travail dans le système de santé ici à Nouveau-Brunswick, parce que ton travail fait le système améliorer jour avant jour avant jour. So continue your good work. Thank you for what you've done. And I know many people are going to be coming and telling me how to spend this money, and some will probably want me to spend it 14 times over. But that's the work we do, and it's great to have Minister Holland here in the Greater Moncton area. when, as Dominic said, we started with Minister Duclos a year or two ago, a year and a half, I guess, in St. John. And then the portfolio switched. And as you know, we have a Minister Holland here in New Brunswick. So when I received the first invitation to talk on healthcare from Minister M. Holland, I picked up the phone and said, Mike, why are you sending me this email and wanting to talk about, and of course, he freaked. He thought someone was impersonating him. And as you know, nobody can impersonate Mike Holland other than himself. So anyways, we got it sorted out, and it was Minister Mark Holland. Anyways, so we met and we became friends. He's a very personable fellow, much like our other two ministers here today, who do a great job in representing the Federation here in New Brunswick. And Mark found this room, so if you can find this room, then you can run the healthcare system in Canada for sure. But I lost a lot of sleep last night because Dominic usually has a good zinger for me, and usually 2 or 3 during a 10-minute speech. So I was trying to come up with something, and I had nothing. So he didn't zing me today, so that's good. We're going to be even. Thanks, Dominic. Great to see you, and thanks again. And you know, we're pleased to see that the federal government has acknowledged the Made in New Brunswick solutions here in the province. We've been working very, very hard to implement our health plan, which has again gone through a couple of years. And I'm proud that we just unveiled one of the biggest budgets for healthcare here in the province of New Brunswick, to the tune of about $3.8 billion. And that's an increase of almost $1 billion since 2018. So there is a significant increase in the financial contribution, and we appreciate the federal government helping us out there. Et nous avons fait le progrès considérable jusqu'à présent. Nous n'attendons pas d'être l'action nous agressons. La population de Nouveau-Brunswick devient plus vieux. Nous avons 20% plus d'années que le reste du Canada. Dans les prochaines 15 ans, on attend que ces 3 Nouveau-Brunswickois ou Nouveau-Brunswickois seront 65 ou plus vieux. Moi-même. I had a significant birthday the other day. We won't get into that. C'est l'une des raisons pour lesquelles de devoir rester attentif aux longues listes d'attendre pour l'intervention chirurgicale. So we've made progress. Hip and knee surgeries, the long lists that were there are reducing every day because of the hard work and the investment in healthcare here in the province of New Brunswick. We've reduced the cataract surgeries because of clinics that have opened up in Bathurst, Miramichi, Fredericton, and there'll be more to come, so that people can see clearer and have a better quality of life, and also reduce their chance of falling, which again keeps them out of the hospital, keeps them out of the emergency room. And the mobile x-ray unit that was mentioned by Minister Holland, that mobile x-ray unit started as a pilot project, again through an agreement, federal and provincial, and it prevented, we started down in Loch Lomond Villa, and it prevented almost 340 visits of seniors to the emergency room to get an x-ray. So with this unit, you can just roll it up, x-ray the wrist, the hip, the back. It's very, very versatile. So we've expanded that right across all the zones here in the province of New Brunswick. And again, that's part of the investments that's made here to make people's lives better. So working together to improve healthcare for Canadians, this agreement is centered around the 4 shared priorities: access to surgery, access to primary care, long-term care, and an integrated, connected healthcare system. I know we've had a busy time over the last few months in putting together the agreement, and it's great that we're here today. Better healthcare is a priority for New Brunswickers. L'amélioration des soins de santé est une priorité pour les Nouveau-Brunswickois. So interesting, a couple of things I'll just highlight. We've launched the My Health NB mobile phone app. If you don't have it, it's away. I'm touching my phone. It's right there. Because the app's on your phone, and you can get your blood results. You can get all the results right there on your phone and you can check it out. Le recrutement est une priorité maintenant. Notre personnel travaille d'arrache-pied pour notre des professionnels à haut niveau dans notre province. And I had a text from one of our staff I think it was Tuesday night. They're down in the Philippines recruiting more people to come here and work in the healthcare system. They were in Dubai earlier. And again, that's a great opportunity where people are looking to come to Canada. And people saying, Canada's my dream country because they can come here, they can become a citizen, and they can work and help us in our healthcare system. So I could go on, but I know that there's other people that want to get to this podium. And so I will say encore une fois, merci beaucoup, Minister Holland, et les autres ministers, mon ami Dominic et Jeanette. It's great to see you. And let's keep up the good work. I know the next speaker is a friend who's been following me. She was on Riverview Council and then became a provincial MLA, and now she's a minister, and our offices are just à côté in the Department of Health. And she's doing a great job, mental health and addictions. That's a tough portfolio. We know it's tough, and she's working very, very hard. So without any further ado, please welcome Minister Sherry Wilson.
Well, good morning, everyone. Bonjour à tous. C'est un plaisir d'être ici aujourd'hui. Merci, Minister Holland, LeBlanc, et Petitpas Taylor, Fitch, et Bacchus d'être ici. This is going to be great news for New Brunswick, and really appreciate you all being here today. This is a great day indeed. Since becoming minister responsible for addictions mental health services, I've seen how much the Department of Health is doing on addictions and mental health. One of the key pillars of our provincial health care plan is addictions and mental health to address the very real struggles individuals face. Mental health and substance use disorders are a concern for the people who struggle with them, for their loved ones, and for our communities. The Government of New Brunswick is working to increase the availability of addiction and mental health services across our province. We're making a progress on this plan. We've seen 8 initiatives of the addiction and mental health portfolio completed, while 1 is still in progress. One of our jobs is to provide the resources to the people who need it most, because that provides hope. And where there is hope, there's a chance to recover. And that's where this funding comes in. We're working on projects that will improve the health of New Brunswickers, and it is so important that we offer evidence-based treatment and supports to these individuals who are working hard on a journey to recovery. Beyond hope, we have tangible accomplishments to celebrate and more to complete. We've launched the Planet Youth New Brunswick, a 5-year project to assist communities in finding ways to reduce substance use amongst youth at 4 sites across our province. This allows us to help them to be more resilient and reach their full potential while giving communities a framework to make long-term changes to create healthy communities. We've also partnered with philanthropic organizations to provide young New Brunswickers and their families easier access to mental health and addiction supports through integrated youth wellness hubs around the province. We've also launched new addiction centers, services center in Campbellton. The Center for Hope and Harmony, managed by the Vitality Health Network, is now treating patients. It is part of a $24.5 million effort to improve access to detox programs and concurrent disorder treatments for those struggling with addiction. The center has added 6 beds for a total of 24. With the increase in the number of beds, here going from 18 to 24, this center will help improve access to care for clients from across New Brunswick. Ce projet est une initiative du Plan provincial de santé. The department has also introduced several resources to improve access, including open access to one-at-a-time therapy, which is now available at all community addiction and mental health clinics. The Bridge the Gap website offers online resources designed to support mental wellness. The New Brunswick Addiction and Mental Health Helpline is a free, confidential, bilingual 24-hour service for citizens dealing with various addiction and mental health concerns. As of August 2023, Ridgewood Addiction Services has changed from 28-day rehab program to a concurrent disorder live-in treatment program. 4 beds were also added to the concurrent live-in program. So we look forward to making further progress on delivering on initiatives outlined in the plan. So thank you, merci. And now I'd like to turn the microphone over to my friend and colleague, Kathy Baucus, who's been doing incredible work as Minister for Seniors.
I always tease they pick me as Minister for Seniors because I have the most gray hair and need these. Oh, thank you, Minister Wilson, and good morning, everyone. Bonjour. It was so nice to meet you, Minister Holland, and to renew and say hello to Minister LeBlanc and Minister Petitpas-Taylor. I'm so pleased to be part of this announcement. What wonderful news for New Brunswickers and New Brunswick seniors. As we heard earlier, New Brunswick has the fastest growing population of seniors in the country. Like our colleagues at the Department of Health, the Department of Social Development has been working hard to prepare for this growth and meet the needs of seniors. As Minister responsible for seniors, I believe all seniors deserve the opportunity to age with dignity and in comfort. Making this possible takes a collaborative effort. In my role as Minister, I have had the honor of hearing from seniors from around the province on what it is they want and need. I can't expect to know that listening to somebody sitting in an office in Fredericton or Ottawa or wherever. The thing I hear the most is our seniors would like to age at home and in their own communities. This is an important part of the provincial health plan, and we continue to work on a number of initiatives, including the ongoing expansion of the very successful Nursing Home Without Walls program. This program gives those aging at home the opportunity to utilize the various services provided by nursing homes. And although we've been focusing on helping seniors age at home, we are still making sure that those who reside in nursing homes have the care they need, and we are working hard to reduce assessment times for that long-term care. We need a stable workforce to ensure New Brunswickers receive the right care at the right time in the right place. And we've been working closely with our partners to make this happen. To address staffing challenges in the province, Social Development partners with a number of government departments, as well as the New Brunswick Association of Nursing Homes, the Association of Special Care Homes, individual nursing homes, and other senior-focused stakeholder groups. Social Development continues to be a leader in supporting nursing home recruitment with the international recruitment efforts. The departmental staff has been an integral part of hospital teams as they work to find the right level of care for those waiting in hospital. Initiatives in the bilateral agreement, like care coordination, will certainly aid in the effort to ensure people receive the right level of care that meets their needs. Ensuring long-term care facilities have the tools to care for people is also important. Ventilation upgrades, structural and condition assessments, and other items mentioned in the agreement will help us ensure these vital facilities have what they need. I am very excited about what is to come with this new partnership as we continue to work on making sure this important network has the means to meet the needs of our seniors. So let's get this agreement signed. I'd like to invite Minister Petitpas-Taylor back to the
perpetrators abuse power, harm and traumatize victims, and tear apart the trust placed in us by the communities we serve, communities already experiencing untold hardship. It is up to all of us to eradicate sexual exploitation and abuse from our work, support victims, and all perpetrators and their enablers to account. That means leaders taking a zero-tolerance approach as a priority. It means colleagues reporting on and acting against any wrongdoing, and it means member states properly vetting and training their troops and policy officers, responding urgently and decisively to any allegations, and rapidly resolving all paternity claims. Together, let's stand united under our blue flag, redress wrongs, and stamp out sexual exploitation and abuse for good. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us. It is a historic day today, where for the first time after almost 6 months, the Security Council adopted a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire. And we in the Arab group, from the first day of this aggression, were united around 3 objectives. The first objective was an immediate ceasefire to stop the aggression against our people. Today is a significant step in that direction. The second objective was to have humanitarian assistance up to the need of our people in the Gaza Strip. I believe the ceasefire will open the door for the implementation of that second objective. And the third objective was not to allow the crime against humanity from forcefully transferring our people outside the Gaza Strip, although they have been internally forced to move from the north to the center to the south and then to other places in the Gaza Strip. A ceasefire, immediate ceasefire, would allow our people to return to the places where they were displaced from. So I am proud of the unity of the Arab group. I am proud that our representative in the Security Council is Algeria, working closely with us, reflecting the demands of the Arab group, and I think today we prevailed. Those who say that the Security Council is not enforceable or not mandatory, give us a break. We go to the General Assembly, they say it is not enforced or binding. We come to the Security Council, they tell us it's not binding. We do not buy that. Security Council resolutions are binding. And if Israel is not going to implement it, then it is the duty of the Security Council to use Chapter 7 to take measures and punitive measures in order to make them obey the resolution of the Security Council. We are not done. We salute our people in Gaza and in all of Palestine. All of our people, all of their leaders, we are one as Palestinians. We survived this ordeal. We will rebuild Gaza. We are very proud and resilient people. And thank you for covering our story during these 5.5 months. And we are not done. We will go back to the Security Council tomorrow. We will ask them to defend the brave Secretary General who is with us today in refugee camps of the Palestinians in Jordan. He is the one who went to Rafah twice. He is the one who met with the leaders of Egypt, of Jordan, of Palestine, of all the Arabs, calling for a humanitarian ceasefire from early after the aggression. And he today called from Jordan, implement the Security Council resolution that was adopted just a few minutes ago. We salute him. We will defend him. We will defend the agencies of the United Nations, and we will ask the Security Council tomorrow to issue a statement or a position defending the Secretary General and the UN agencies. And we will not be done. We will continue the march, and we will start working on a draft resolution to make sure that Rafah will not be invaded. Rafah should be protected. We should not create a horrific humanitarian situation or crimes in Rafah to push our people outside Rafah in the direction of Egypt. So we are not done. We will continue working. The unity of the Arab group is playing a tremendous role in the unity in the Security Council, especially among the 10, and we will continue working and we will keep you informed. Talal, you are first, number one.
Thank you so much. What's your comment on what the American ambassador, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, said, that any release, any ceasefire must be accompanied by the release of all, unconditional release of all hostages, knowing very well by many, and they argue, that if all hostages were released, there's nothing to stop Israel from going the whole way.
Well, Israel has to abide by its obligation and the charter, and it has to immediately stop the fighting. This is what the resolution called, immediate ceasefire. Any member can interpret as they wish, but the law is the law. The language of the resolution is crystal clear, an immediate ceasefire. Therefore, an immediate ceasefire has to be put in place.
Also calls for unconditional, immediate release of hostages. Now, there are many people in the Middle East say, what guarantees are, once the hostages, all hostages are released, what guarantees do we have that Israel will not go the whole way to Rafah, more destructions? What stops Israel from doing that?
I understand the frustration of our people, and they have the right to be frustrated from the international community that dragged its feet for 5.5 months before they agreed to a ceasefire. But the language of the resolution is crystal clear. Operative paragraph 1 starts from demanding an immediate ceasefire. The second part of the sentence, it is not conditional upon the first part. It says, and also it calls for the other part. The other part was reflected in all the resolutions in the Security Council, adopted in the Security Council, and the resolutions adopted in the 10th emergency session twice in the General Assembly. All of us are saying immediate ceasefire, and in fact, our brothers and sisters, Egypt, Qatar, are negotiating with the United States and others, and negotiating and mediating with our brothers, Hamas, the release of the hostages and exchange of prisoners. So that principle is not being rejected by all of us, provided that there is a release of the Palestinian detainees, especially those who are serving life sentence. And I think that that will happen, and we hope that it happens very soon. And we are behind Egypt and Qatar, who are playing a very important role in the mediation and the negotiation in order to have a deal. So that is not something that is rejected by the Arabs or by those who are negotiating this agreement on that deal. You asked a lot of questions before, but if there's a woman before you that wants to ask a question, would have the right. I don't see any.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador.
You're the last one.
Thank you. Anadi Satuma from Al Jazeera English. During the meeting, Prime Minister Netanyahu indicated that he was going to cancel a visit to D.C. in reaction to the Security Council adoption. What is your comment on the fact that it seems that negotiations on the ground for a deal are going in the opposite direction, not towards a deal, in reaction to this resolution?
I don't really know what the negotiation on the ground entails. I'm not involved in it. My job is to work at the UN, including the Security Council, to produce resolutions like the one that we produced. That is my job. Now, with regard to the relationship between Netanyahu and the current administration in Washington, D.C., we leave it up to them to respond to his, disrespectful way of behaving with the country that is responsible for the survival of Israel, and arming Israel, and giving it, ammunition, and giving it billions of dollars to continue the atrocities against our people. They have to stand up and respond to him. That is not my job to respond to that. It is their job. Thank you very much for being with us.
I I understand that you go to the General Assembly and it's not binding, that you come here and it's not binding, but we just witnessed how two different ambassadors interpreted this resolution in two different ways.
I think that interpretation is among lawyers and legal experts over, this issue. There are differences of opinions, but the law is the law. The Charter demands from all member states to honor and respect and implement Security Council resolutions. And my brother Mahmoud is the legalist among us. But let me also add, just in case that a country rebel against Security Council resolution, it makes then sense that the Security Council that has tools available to them to resort to Chapter 7 to take measures in order to force that rebel country to comply with Security Council resolution. But my brother Mahmoud can respond.
Thank you. I mean, the ambassador has summed it perfectly. Article 25 of the Charter says clearly that the members of the United Nations shall carry out the decisions of the Security Council. The language used in OP1 is demand language. It's a binding language which is based on Article 25 of the Charter. As such, it is a mandatory resolution that has to be carried out. If you're talking about Chapter 7, when we use Chapter 7, it is for enforceable measure. If a country violates international law in a manner that threatens international peace and security, you can use force or impose sanctions. This is what Chapter 7 is about. So that's the difference.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you. نعم.
When I see the wonderful work UNRWA is doing in these schools, in these health centers, providing vital support to Palestine refugees in Jordan, in Syria, in Lebanon, and in the occupied Palestinian territories, I feel that it's absolutely necessary to preserve this backbone of the international humanitarian aid to the Palestinian people. And I can guarantee that we will be doing everything and introduce all the necessary reforms to make sure that UNRWA will be an agency fully abiding by the UN principles and by the humanitarian principles of independence, neutrality, and impartiality.
There's seats available. Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Tor Vennesland, the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, today briefed the Security Council by video teleconference about the ongoing fighting in Gaza. He said that he was appalled by the immense scale of death, destruction, and human suffering wrought by Israel's military campaign in Gaza, with civilian killings at a rate that is unprecedented. And he once again condemned the horrific armed attack by Hamas and other groups on the 7th of October. Nothing can justify these attacks of terror, he said. The remaining hostages must be released immediately and unconditionally. Mr. Vennesland added that he is concerned over what may be violations of international humanitarian law, including possible non-compliance with the requirements of distinction, proportionality, and precautions in attack. The Special Coordinator welcomed the opening of a maritime corridor to deliver much-needed additional humanitarian assistance by sea, but reiterated that for aid deliveries at scale, there's no meaningful substitute to delivery by land. Mr. Vennesland said that the enormity of the humanitarian, security, and political challenges we face requires a collective, creative, and immediate response. He said that we must urgently address the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza. He regretted that despite intensive diplomatic efforts, we have not seen an agreement on a ceasefire and the release of hostages. We've shared his remarks. Further on the situation in Gaza, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports that the UN and its partners continue to do everything possible wherever and whenever we can to address surging needs despite tremendous obstacles to our aid operations. Over the weekend, the World Health Organization and its partners evacuated 2 6-year-old patients and their caregivers from Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza. One of the children has leukemia, while the other has cystic fibrosis, and both will now receive treatment abroad. WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus once more appeals for sustained and safe medical transfers in Gaza to ensure all children and sick patients in need of urgent care have a chance to survive. To date, about 3,400 patients have been evacuated out of Gaza. That's out of some 9,200 people who urgently require medical evacuation. Meanwhile, as hunger soars in Gaza, aid organizations continue to screen and treat children under the age of 5 for acute malnutrition. The UN Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, is carrying out screenings at shelters in Deir al-Balah and plans to expand into al-Mawasi and shelters in Khan Yunis. Between mid-January and mid-March of this year, more than 28,000 children under the age of 5 had been screened for acute malnutrition. The nearly 2,000 children diagnosed with acute malnutrition are currently receiving the required treatment. On Saturday, WHO delivered treatment kits for severe acute malnutrition as well as therapeutic milk to the Stabilization Center at Kamal Adwan Hospital. Thanks. The report of the Secretary General on Special Measures for Protection from Sexual Exploitation and Abuse, covering the year 2023, has been published today. As in previous years, the report provides details on system-wide efforts to strengthen our capacity to prevent and respond to sexual exploitation and abuse, in line with the Secretary General's strategy. For example, many UN agencies, funds, and programs have introduced or updated their strategies to institutionalize safeguards against all forms of sexual misconduct. However, despite this progress, the report notes that the lack of adequate and sustained resources continues to impede the effective implementation of initiatives across the UN system, particularly at the field level. Our approach, which is centered on the rights and needs of victims, continues. We are intensifying efforts to uphold the rights of victims and to end impunity. This also includes engagement with member states to facilitate the resolution of paternity claims. With an unprecedented rise in humanitarian crises around the world, the report states that there is an urgent necessity to recalibrate our approach to funding in this area. The Secretary General's Special Coordinator on Improving the United Nations Response to Sexual Exploitation and Abuse, Christian Saunders, has commissioned a comprehensive assessment to determine how best to integrate the prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse in all UN activities and programs. This assessment will propose a strategy to ensure sustainable, effective prevention work across the UN system, and options for predictable and adequate resourcing at headquarters and in the field. And today, in a video message, the Secretary General said sexual exploitation and abuse violate everything the United Nations stands for. It is up to all of us to eradicate sexual exploitation and abuse from our work, support victims, and hold perpetrators and their enablers to account, he added. Both the video message and report are available online. We have a short update for you on Haiti. The World Food Program says that yesterday, together with local partners, they delivered hot meals to 18,500 displaced people, making it their largest distribution in March. However, access to people in need remains sporadic. Between the 20th and 22nd of March, WFP reported that it was not able to reach some 18,000 people in need with food due to roadblocks and insecurity. Since the 29th of February, UNICEF and its partners have distributed some 1.7 million liters of water for more than 15,000 people in Port-au-Prince. On the health front, the monitoring of disease outbreaks continues in sites for displaced people across the capital. Our health colleagues warn that the distribution of medicine and medical supplies, including supplies to respond to cholera, remains a critical need, with insecurity hindering the replenishment of stocks. Meanwhile, UNICEF's executive director, Catherine Russell, warned today that violence and instability have consequences far beyond the risk of the violence itself, as the current context is creating a child health and nutrition crisis that could cost the lives of countless children. Turning to South Sudan, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is concerned about incidents that continue to impede the humanitarian response in the country. In a new report, OCHA recorded more than 30 incidents curtailing humanitarian access in South Sudan last month. Nearly half of these incidents involved violence against humanitarian staff and assets. Our humanitarian colleagues warned that this is causing delays in the movement of aid and personnel in South Sudan, and even the suspension of some programs. This comes at a time when the country is grappling with an influx of returnees due to the conflict in Sudan. These new arrivals are stretching response capacities and putting additional pressure on host communities. Meanwhile, funding constraints are compounding the challenges that humanitarian organizations are facing. This year's Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan for South Sudan has received just $335 million, less than 20% of the $1.8 billion required. This funding level is much lower than last year. In Ukraine, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that attacks continued in the south and east of the country yesterday and today, impacting civilians and critical infrastructure. Several people have been injured in the cities of Odessa and Kharkiv, according to local authorities. Hundreds of thousands of people remain without power, mainly in Odessa and Kharkiv regions. Authorities estimate that restoring the power to its full capacity will take months. Humanitarian organizations are on the ground, providing emergency aid to people affected. The UN Children's Fund, UNICEF, warns that 9 years into the conflict in Yemen, almost 10 million children remain in urgent need of humanitarian assistance. While the reduction in active conflict since April 2022 has led to a decrease in civilian casualties and distress across communities, the situation remains fragile without a sustainable political settlement, UNICEF says. That's especially critical at a time when more than half of the population, 18.2 million people, including 9.8 million children, remain in need of life-saving support. UNICEF notes the persistent malnutrition in the country, where over 2.7 million children are acutely malnourished, and 49% of children under 5 suffer from stunting or chronic malnutrition. There's more in a press release from the agency. The International Organization for Migration today released a report showing that in the last 10 years, more than 63,000 deaths and disappearances were documented during migration, and more deaths were recorded in 2023 than in any prior year. According to the report, more than one-third of deceased migrants whose countries of origin could be identified come from countries in conflict or with large refugee populations, highlighting the dangers faced by those attempting to flee conflict zones without safe pathways. The International Organization for Migration says that these figures demonstrate the urgent need for strengthened search and rescue capacities, facilitation of safe, regular migration pathways, and evidence-based action to prevent further loss of life. IOM added that action should also include intensified international cooperation against unscrupulous smuggling and trafficking networks. I have a programming note for tomorrow, which is Wednesday. We shall be joined virtually by our guest, Bintu Keita, the Special Representative of the Secretary General in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and head of the UN Organization's Stabilization Mission in the DRC, MONUSCO. She will brief on the situation in the DRC following our participation in the Security Council meeting on MONUSCO tomorrow morning. And today, we're delighted to thank our friends in Zagreb and Lima for their nation's full contributions to the regular budget. The checks from Croatia and Peru take us to 92 fully paid up member states. Are there any questions for me? Yes, Deji.
Yeah, today it seems the Security Council, the member states are still discussing on the binding or not binding on the Security Council resolution. Yesterday you said the Security Council resolution is international law, which means it's binding, right? Yes or no? I have to ask.
First of all, for legal questions, I normally defer to tell you to ask the lawyers. But for this, I would just refer you to the United Nations Charter, which is a handy document that you can always carry in your pocket.
Article 25, the member of the United Nations agree to accept and carry out the decisions of the Security Council in accordance with the present charter.
Yes, that is Article 25, and that is where we stand.
Yep. So, which means it's binding.
I will leave you to do your own interpretations.
Okay. So now we know that the U.S. they always they said it's not binding. It's one of the founding members of this very institution. Just now we heard member states that if this resolution as described as not binding, it would be like a fundamental change in some of the structure of this very institution. Do you worry that would set a very bad precedent to the future future Security Council resolutions?
Well, Deji, you've noticed that this discussion is happening as we speak in the Security Council, and I will let the members of the Council speak and debate for themselves. I think there's some very powerful arguments being made, and I think the members of the Council need to listen to each other.
So, Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield said, "It is critical that we continue to stand together in support of the UN Charter, that we continue to call for accountability for the atrocities." And that's what she said on March 15th of 2024 So what do you think of this kind of double standard now?
Again, that's your analysis.
So you think it's not a double standard?
But we ultimately, what we want to focus on is that the Security Council, after many long months, worked out and agreed on a resolution. Agreement in the Security Council is necessary. The unity of the Security Council is necessary, and we hope that they can continue to maintain their unity.
But the thing is, after 24 hours, it seems this resolution is not implemented, right?
The implementation of resolutions is something that takes time. The enforcement of resolutions is something that is ultimately up to the international community as a whole. But you just read out yourself what Article 25 states, and that is the rules, one of the founding rules of the United Nations Charter. Yes, Edie.
On a related subject, the Prime Minister of Israel said that adoption of the resolution emboldened Hamas to reject a deal for a ceasefire and hostage release that was on the table, negotiated by the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt. Does the Secretary General have any comment on that?
We believe that those are two separate issues, and they are not connected. As far as I'm aware, Hamas's declaration came hours before the adoption of the Security Council resolution, so it's not as if one led to the other. But above and beyond that, we believe that the negotiations should continue, and we're still pushing to make sure that there will be a ceasefire and a release of hostages. So to the extent that we have influence with the various negotiators and mediators, we've been using that.
On a completely different topic, in Venezuela, the main opposition coalition has been unable to register a presidential candidate for their upcoming elections. Does the Secretary General have any comment on this failure, which is second failure?
Well, I mean, for us, what's really important is that there is an environment in Venezuela that is conducive to free and fair elections. We regret any development that could impede electoral guarantees, and we recall the need to guarantee the right to vote and to be elected through genuine periodic elections. The Secretary General underscores the importance that the international community continues engaging with the parties towards a negotiated roadmap for elections, and he reiterates his call for the implementation in good faith of Venezuelan-led agreements, including the Barbados Agreement. Amelie.
Thanks, Farhan. It's been reported earlier this morning that many Palestinian people have been killed by airdrop of aid, droning or trampled or crushed, whatever. I mean, I know that you've said several times that the best way to get aid into Gaza is by road, but do you think, considering the risk of the airdrop, it should be stopped?
Well, certainly we've said, and related to a similar case just a couple of weeks ago, that there are many risks associated with airdrops, and that's something that the people who are attempting the airdrops need to be cognizant of. They need to make sure that these airdrops can be done in as safe a way as possible. But again, for us, the main point is exactly what you just pointed out, that we believe that there needs to be much more aid coming in by road, which is both safer but also much more efficient as a means of delivering aid. Mike?
A couple questions for you. Over the weekend, President Biden signed into law a number of spending bills, one of which, State Department foreign spending bill, would not only cut funding for UNRWA for a calendar year, but also prohibits funding for the UN Commission of Inquiry on the Israeli-Palestinian file. It withholds funds from the UN Human Rights Council. It also necessitates the UN to assess and report on efforts to combat anti-Semitism and anti-Israel bias within the system. Does the Secretary General have any plan, have any concerns, have any course of action here to address those obvious concerns that have been launched by, a pretty wide bipartisan congressional caucus here on those issues?
Well, the UN, and including the Secretary General, remain in regular contact with the authorities in the United States government to make sure that any concerns they have about our operations are addressed. And we'll continue to do that with the concerns expressed in this latest legislation. Regarding the Relief and Works Agency, as you're aware, we are working with now different procedures, including an investigation by the Office of Internal Oversight Services and a look at the neutrality and the operations of UNRWA by the team led by Catherine Colonna, and we'll be sharing that information as well. And we'll continue to follow up to address any concerns. But for us, it's vitally important, of course, that UNRWA, as the lead humanitarian agency in the occupied territories, is able to go about its work with proper funding.
Can you give any specific examples? Like, I know Mr. Moratinos in the Alliance of Civilizations office has been working on quite some time on a plan to combat anti-Semitism. It's still in the works, from what I understand. Can you give specific examples outside of the confines of UNRWA where the UN either is making progress on this issue to the satisfaction of the U.S. Congress or is planning some additional measures to meet those requirements?
Well, I don't know about what specific steps will satisfy the requirements of the Congress. I mean, those are things that we will have to study and see what can be done to accommodate those specific requests. But yes, both with regard to Mr. Moratinos, but also with regards to policies through the various agencies, we are trying to foster an environment of inclusiveness in which any sorts of racism, any types of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or other such prejudices and biases are not present in the work that is done. Vladimir.
Thank you, Farhan. There was a report about export of oil to North Korea from Russia. We know that is not allowed according to the Security Council resolution. So the same question, are these restrictions binding or not?
The ones on export of oil?
Yes, to North Korea.
That's really a question for the Security Council Sanctions Committee. Obviously, there's sanctions on North Korea, and the Security Council has its own sanctions committee that deals with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and determines anything that is a violation of the sanctions regime. Alan and then Anade.
Thank you, Varun. Today, the director of Russian Federal Security Service, Alexander Bortnikov, stated that the first data taken from the people detained after the terrorist attack in Moscow show clearly the Ukrainian trace. What's your comment regarding that? Thank you.
We have no information to verify or confirm that. You'll have seen what the Secretary General said in his statement on Friday, and that is where we stand on this issue. Anade?
Thank you, Farhan. Can I ask for a couple of clarifications on Haiti? Mm-hmm. You mentioned that yesterday the WFP was able to provide 18,000 hot meals. Is that only in Port-au-Prince, or are they now providing hot meals outside the capital as well?
I believe that is in Port-au-Prince, but we can ask WFP if they have any more details on that.
Okay, great. And then secondly, also in Haiti, the multinational security force, we haven't had an update on the fund lately. Do you know how much is in the bank at the moment?
Yeah, it's $10.8 million.
Still?
It's a number I have engraved in my heart. Okay. It has not changed in many, many days.
Please let us know if it does change. Thank you.
Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Farhan. I have a few questions. First, I noticed that Mr. Thor Winsland did not refer to the resolution of the Security Council adopted yesterday. he did not mention it. Is there any reason for
This
overlooking
this report by Mr. Venesland was his periodic report to the Security Council on developments that happened in the occupied territories over the last months. So that's what he was referring to, not about the incident that happened right after.
Second, does any country, large or small, have the right to decide what is binding or not binding by the UN Security Council resolutions?
Abdelhamid, you've heard the discussion I had with Deji on this. Again, you can look at the UN Charter for yourself.
Yeah. President of Israel, Mr. Herzog, said today that the war will continue until either Mr. Sinwar is killed or captured. Do you have any comment on that?
I do not. We are continuing our work to see what can be done on getting a ceasefire and the release of hostages, and we'll continue on that effort. Mike?
And my last question.
Okay.
My last question.
Yeah.
The special rapporteur on the human rights in the occupied Palestinian territory issued a long report under the title Anatomy of a Genocide, of 25 pages or so. Are you aware of it? Is the SG review this report? Do you subscribe to the findings of Ms. Albanese?
Well, as you know, the rapporteurs that report to the Human Rights Council are independent of us. We don't comment on their work one way or another across the board, and it'll be up to the Human Rights Council to evaluate her work. Mr. Wackenheim.
Thank you. In the wake of October 7th, the Secretary General made some controversial comments that the October 7th attacks did not happen in a vacuum. Back on Friday, an internationally designated terror group attacked indiscriminately civilians. They claim it's because the government of those civilians have been oppressing the constituency that terror group purports to represent. So I'll ask you in parallel, does the Secretary General feel that terror attack in Moscow happened inside or outside of a vacuum?
These are separate incidents, and so they need to be looked at separately. But his standpoint across the board is that actions don't just erupt out of nowhere. And ultimately, if we want to deal with problems, we have to look at what was underlying how those problems came about. That would be the case across the board, in Russia, in Israel, and everywhere.
So should ISIS grievances be taken into account going forward?
That's a bit of an oversimplification of what I just said.
I'm not analyzing, I'm asking.
No, I mean, what I said is all crises are the result of different factors. Ultimately, if you want to prevent problems from arising, you have to look at what contributes, whether it's socioeconomic factors on the ground, whether it's how people have been educated, how militants have come into their mindset. This is something we talk about in various different reports, including the reports we deal with that come out from our counterterrorism office.
Thank you, Farhan.
All right. Have a good afternoon, everyone. And for your enjoyment, my conversation.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.